It's amazing what can happen in just 2 years. If you told anyone in the greater Boston area that the Boston Bruins would go from the best regular season record in NHL history to a bottom 5 team in the entire league in that short time span, you'd sadly get a lot of people calling it, but that's beside the point. After the fall from grace that was the 2024-25 season for the Bruins, many people were left pointing fingers all around for what caused this. Even outsiders were trying to pinpoint the nexus of this disaster piece. And it didn't take long for people to find their scapegoat. His name? Though it's easy to blame the goalie for all of this, especially one who just got paid as handsomely as Jeremy Swayman, the fact of the matter is that hockey is a game that requires at least 20 people on their A-game 82 nights a year to get anywhere near relative success, let alone the glory of the Stanley Cup. So when pieces begin to fall out of place, people love to go back to where it all started and blame that singular moment. For the Boston Bruins, it was Jeremy Swayman's lengthy contract holdout. So let's get back to that moment real quick. It's impossible to talk about this season without first addressing the elephant in the room. While teams were throwing around massive contract after massive contract to anyone with legs, the headline for the NHL that prevailed throughout the entire free agency period was the saga of the holdout Jeremy Swayman and his agent, Louis Gross, enacted against general manager Don Sweeney and president of hockey operations Cam Neely. Although Swayman had never held a starting role in Boston, having been the backup to Tuukka Rask and Linus Ullmark in the 4 years he's played, the play that he exhibited was indicative of him either being the absolute best backup in the entire league, or a high-quality starter. For a short time, while Ullmark was injured in 2024, Swayman started 6 consecutive games and went 3-0-3. However, though that short sample size had indicated a decent presence as a starter, the lack of long-term experience with that workload led to a discrepancy over the contract. With Ullmark being traded to the Senators, Swayman would be forced to take up the starter role, whether people were ready for it or not. Both camps were in agreement over the term. No matter what, Swayman would be in Boston for the next 8 years. But Swayman's camp was looking at $10 million, and the Bruins front office was looking around $8. This little difference of $2 million led to a holdout that lasted until the start of the season and had everyone talking. Many had derided Swayman for holding out as long as he did, insisting that his holdout time was selfish and would take away from important offseason conditioning, which, for what it's worth, was true. On the other hand, Sweeney and Neely weren't without blame either. During free agency, not only had they made out massive contracts to the like of Elias Lindholm and Nikita Zadorov, but had also nickeled and dimed the cap space with signings like Max Jones, Riley Tufte, and Tyler Johnson until they were slammed up into an $8.5 million wall. By making these signings, they didn't have the cap ability to sign Swayman until he relented. Comments made by the front office didn't help matters, especially one from Neely saying,
Well, I don't want to get into the weeds with what his ask is, but I know that I have 64 million reasons why I'd be playing right now.
What? Which angered a lot of people. Gross even commented that this was the first time that the figure of $64 million had come up in contract negotiations. To air the dirty laundry and to throw Swayman under the bus planted a clear target on the backs of Neely and Sweeney. But because the Bruins front office has never been good at actually handling these matters with the care that they deserve, this was sort of just swept under the rug as just a normal thing that the Bruins front office does. Although, a third camp propped up the blame for Gross himself. Gross is an agent who constantly drives a hard bargain. Bruins fans know him well for pricing Torrey Krug out of Boston and signing with St. Louis in 2019, but perhaps his masterclass is with William Nylander. In the 2018-19 season, the Toronto Maple Leafs were trying their hardest to make a deal with Nylander, who was an RFA at the time. However, Gross drove up the price so hard that there was fear among Toronto that he wouldn't sign before the December 1st eligibility deadline. Eventually, Nylander and Gross would accept the terms of the contract just minutes before the deadline. It caused Nylander to miss a sizable chunk of the season and would struggle for the rest of it, amassing his lowest point total since his rookie season. With this penchant for pushing up the prices of his talents, Gross's refusal to work cooperatively with the front office rubbed many people the wrong way. Swayman would eventually sign on April 6th to the tune of 8 years, $66 million, just days before the start of the season. All that was left to do was watch how Swayman would play as the top goalie of the team. It's been no secret that this season had been the worst in Jeremy Swayman's career, and one of the worst in recent Bruins starter history. In 58 games, he amassed a record of 22, 29, and 7, a goals against average of 3.12, and a save percentage of .892, all of which are career worst for him. Of goalies that have started at least 45 games this season, his save percentage and goals against average have ranked as the 5th worst in the league. He had 14 games this season allowing 5 goals or more, and no goaltender allowed more goals than he did this season. Many of the worst losses that the Bruins had allowed this season, such as allowing 2 hat tricks to Buffalo, blowing a 3-goal lead to Toronto, and allowing 7 goals on just 23 shots to Los Angeles, have fallen on the shoulders of Swayman. The precipitous drop has left many wondering if the Bruins should explore the option of trading Swayman just 1 year into his contract. Given the trade deadline came and went with the Bruins trading off many core pieces, the option seems plausible. However, it's also important to rationalize these frustrations with Swayman. And though no rationalization of this could potentially excuse 9.1 goals saved below expected, it's hard to say that anything in this season was even remotely expected. As previously stated, hockey is not won or lost by one player. It requires 4 forward lines, 3 defensive players, 2 goaltenders potentially, a head coach, and all his underlings working in tandem to attain victory. All of this is to say Swayman could really only do so much with the team in front of him, and that starts at the defensive structure. The entire season, the defense had been a sore spot. The first domino to fall was Hampus Lindholm, breaking his knee, blocking a shot, and never recovering enough to play for the rest of the season. Charlie McAvoy would join him on LTIR a few months later, tearing an AC joint during the Four Nations tournament, as well as getting a staph infection in it. What fun! For the latter half of the season, the top defensive pair was Brandon Carlo and Nikita Zadorov. Carlo, before being traded to Toronto at the trade deadline, was vintage Carlo. His fantastic own zone metrics and stay-at-home defenseman qualities were often undercut by his poor puck management. Zadorov had played pretty similarly, but had a rough acclimation to Boston. On top of bad puck management from him, he took more penalty minutes than any other player this year, putting Swayman in a constant position to defend harder on the penalty kill. With the 2 best defensemen out for the majority of the season, the third being traded to a division rival, and the fourth owning a timeshare in the penalty box, the lack of defensive depth on the Bruins had been massively exposed. Parker Wotherspoon, Ian Mitchell, and Andrew Peeke all played far more than expected, and Mason Lohrei's raw inexperience had been put on full display. Even a deadline trade for a right-handed foil to Zadorov and Henry Jokiharju hadn't been nearly enough for Swayman to be comfortable on any given night. However, even being as injured and overexposed as they may be, the defensive core may not even be the worst part of this team this season. The 2024-2025 Boston Bruins offense may go down as one of the worst in recent franchise history. The only 3 teams that have scored less than the Bruins this season are the Calgary Flames, the San Jose Sharks, and the Nashville Predators. Though Montreal had a streak of 29 games this season without recording more than 30 shots, the Bruins only managing to break that 30-shot threshold twice in the month after the trade deadline is nothing short of disappointing. Aside from Morgan Geekie being shot up a precipice, being the first Bruins player not named Patrice Bergeron, Brad Marchand, or David Pastrnak to break the 30-goal barrier in nearly a decade, nearly every other offensive playmaker severely underperformed. Geekie and Pastrnak are the only players on this roster to have scored 50 or more points during the season. And though it was evident at the trade deadline that this team would be overhauling the core, sending off several key contributors, the new additions in Casey Middlestat, Marat Husnudinov, and Jacob Lauko on his second tour of duty with the Bruins had flashes of brilliance, but would eventually regress to the mean of this team. Key contributors such as Charlie Coyle and Trent Frederick, who seemed to be on an upward trajectory the prior year, crashed back down to earth and even further down with frustratingly inefficient play and would eventually be deadline casualties. Of course your goalie is going to underperform if your offense can't be bothered to hold the zone for more than 10 seconds at a time. With how bad both sides of the ice had been this season, Swayman would have needed to stand on his head just to give the Bruins a chance to make wildcard, let alone being a division leader. It's no wonder why he played so poorly this season given the team in front of him, and that's not even considering the fact that the team completely switched philosophies just 20 games into the season. Let's talk about that. Of course, the insanity of the season can't be discussed without finally mentioning the radical change on November 19th. Just 1 week after Hampus Lindholm sustained the knee fracture that would sideline him for the rest of the season, the Bruins front office fired head coach Jim Montgomery and elevated longtime assistant Joe Sacco to an interim role. Montgomery had previously aided the Bruins to one of the best 2-year stretches in recent NHL history, with the aforementioned 2022-23 season as his first year with the club. However, an 8-9-3 start with multiple captures of his anger being directed towards the players spurred a decision from Neely and Sweeney to give him the axe. Sacco, in 11 years as an assistant coach, had only held head coaching responsibilities thrust onto him for a couple games in 2021, when much of the team, including head coach at the time Bruce Cassidy, had COVID. Previously, he had coached the Colorado Avalanche in the early 2010s and only made the playoffs once. With the switch from Montgomery to Sacco, the difference in play was staggering in the worst ways possible. Though the firing galvanized the team to play somewhat better, the second half of the season would eventually take them down to the 5th worst team in the league. The offensive inefficiencies at the start of the season under Montgomery turned into travesties under Sacco, and the defensive mishaps became far more prevalent. The defense couldn't get the puck out of their own zone to allow for the offense to generate momentum, and the offense couldn't get shots onto the net to effectively buy enough time for the defense to recuperate. And all of this falls back on Swayman. For the Bruins to have a shot at anything resembling the previous 2 seasons, Swayman would need to play at a Vezina level every single night to fill in the gaps that the team in front of him had left, and he couldn't. Though it's fair to say that Swayman's first season on this new contract was disappointing, directing the majority of the blame onto him for the performance of the entire team would be dismissing the other issues the team had to deal with. The radical shift in philosophy, structure, playing ability, and roster strength, alongside his own insufficient play, made the 2024-25 season tumultuous for the whole team, not just Swayman. However, in all of this, it's important to recognize that this is only the first year of Swayman's contract, and it's impossible to pass judgment on years 2 through 8 until they play out. Let me talk about Sergei Bobrovsky for a second, because a very similar situation happened with him in Florida. After signing the highest AAV of active goalies for 7 years, Bobrovsky's first season was a far cry from the former Vezina winner, having posted a 3.23 goals against average and a .900 save percentage. However, as Florida built the team around him, he returned to form and eventually found himself hoisting the Stanley Cup. While the future of Swayman and the Boston Bruins as a team is yet to be determined, it isn't necessarily fair to place the blame of a train wreck season solely on his shoulders. And while it's okay to pass judgment on this season, maybe hold off on those trade talks until year 2.